Our theme in New Life this month is spiritual gifts. And spiritual gifts are certainly an important part of a mission trip. There's no way that we could do this without a variety of gifts within the participants and with those we work with. Maybe we could look at Romans 12. That's kind of a list of some of the spiritual gifts that that God has given us. Romans 12 and verse 5. So in Christ we, though many, form one body. Each member belongs to all the others. We have different gifts according to the grace given to each of us. If your gift is prophesying or speaking, then prophesy in accordance with your faith. If it's serving, then serve. If it's teaching, then teach. If it's to encourage, then give encouragement. If it's giving, then give generously. If it is to lead, do it diligently. If it is to show mercy, do it cheerfully. And I saw each of these gifts in operation with those who participated in the mission trip. And it's a great environment in which for all of us to grow. Now, at one point during the trip, I was thinking, why am I here? I have plenty of mission work to do at home, and when I go back, it's still waiting for me. I have to do more work in less time. So why am I here? But then, why are all of us here? Why did we fly 2,100 miles to another country to do that? Now, sometimes it's easier to get people to fly 2,000 miles away to take the time off than it is to get them to stay here and take the time off. People won't take the time off unless they're sequestered, unless they're set aside. And as Janet was saying, the people in the Bahamas do need the help. They could do a program, maybe a third the size, without us. But I think that our presence there also encourages them to do more than they would have otherwise. They had a lot more volunteers this year than before, steady volunteers. There were a couple who came late occasionally, and Gillian kind of got onto them and says, well, look, these kids that you're supposed to be shepherding, and you say that you love them, and then you don't show up on time for them. Why are you here? And she really gave them a strict chastising. and after that, one of them didn't come back, and the other came back faithfully. But the reliability was important. We say that we want to be there for the kids. We look forward to them to being there. Then we have to be there for them as well. But that was a minor problem in the Bahamian staff. Almost all of them were very reliable. They worked hard. They were fully integrated with all that we did. That's all a big improvement from last year. The adult staff that they had, that they worked, they also brought their gifts to it. Janet mentioned the kitchen staff. That kitchen is not air conditioned. And it is a real sacrifice to be there. So we appreciate the work that they did, and those who went here, we saw gifts of leadership, of compassion, of patience. Different people that had different gifts. It's my, I have a gift of teaching, but I wasn't really teaching. My role there was service. Because of my work here, I don't have a lot of time to plan for the trip. Janet does most of that. And so I have to go along and say, yes, what do you want me to do? Because I don't know what's going on because I haven't had the time to plan for it, where she has had the time to plan for it. So I appreciate that. I'm glad that I can come alongside and help in that way. And one thing that occurred to me, one gift that I saw there was Larry's gift of leadership, not just with the guys that the Bahamian Haitian kids that he was working with, but also with the group as a whole. He instituted a quiet time for all of us. He initiated that. And it was very helpful for us just to set aside time in which, hopefully everybody was doing this on their own. But they weren't. They didn't get around to it. So by having the same time for everybody, it ensured that everybody had time in which they could do it. Some of them tended to nod off instead of doing their quiet time, but that's okay. They had the opportunity. So I was appreciative of that. And one of the things that occurred to me in one of those times, we would have a little time of sharing afterwards, and I shared that with them too. I wanted to share that with you this morning in Luke 14. In Luke 14, in chapter 1, one Sabbath, when Jesus went to eat in the house of a prominent Pharisee, he was being carefully watched. He had been invited to one of these great dinner parties in which were part of the social world of the first century. Verse 7, when he noticed how the guests picked the places of honor at the table, he told them this parable. Now I notice, I hadn't noticed that before, but what follows is a parable. I mean, it looks like advice, but it's really a parable. Verse 8, when someone invites you to a wedding feast, do not take the place of honor, for a person more distinguished than you may have been invited. Now, it sounds like advice. And this is what you're supposed to do when you're invited for dinner. Take the low seat. But no, it's this parable. It has a spiritual significance to it. And I wanted to skip down then to verse 12, kind of the second part of the parable. Verse 12, Jesus said to his host, when you give a luncheon or dinner, do not invite your friends, your brothers or sisters, your relatives, or your rich neighbors. If you do, they may invite you back. And so you will be repaid. Well, this kind of works as advice for hosting an occasion. But, all the commentators agree that Jesus didn't mean this strictly. He says, no, never, don't ever invite your friends, your relatives. Well, if I'm going to throw a banquet, then I will certainly invite Janet. I will invite at least one relative. And Jesus, although he's stating it here in a rather stark terminology, rather exaggerated in a way, he's not meaning this literally. Don't ever invite anybody who can pay you back. The point of it is more the motive. Don't invite these people so that you will get invited in return, and so you'll get more back in return. Verse 13. That when you give a banquet, invite the poor, the crippled, the lame, the blind, and you will be blessed. Verse 14. Although they can't repay you, you will be repaid at the resurrection of the righteous. But this is a parable. It's got a spiritual meaning. The reason that Jesus is saying that this is the way we're supposed to act in our dinner invitations is because this is the way that God is. And this banquet, this dinner party in Jewish talk was often a kind of a metaphor for the kingdom of God. When God is going to have a party for the kingdom, invite people to his kingdom, he doesn't invite the people who can pay him back. That would be nobody. He invites the poor, the lame. That's us. We cannot repay him. And he's saying that's what the life in the kingdom is like, and that's what you need to be like as well. So when you have a SEP or a VBS, don't invite the people who can pay you back. Invite people who really need it, without expecting to get anything in return. When we were there, we did get some value in return. We saw growth in people's lives. And that's encouraging to us. But we were not there to say, look, who are the future generation of movers and shakers in the Bahamas who are going to make a lot of money and are able to, be able to build a better building for this place. That was not our intent. We went there to help, because that is the nature of God. That's what He wants to do. That's the nature of His kingdom that He's inviting us to, the kind of life that He wants us to participate in even now. You know, many of us are familiar with the story of the sheep and goats in Matthew 25, where Jesus says, He tells the sheep, you fed me when I was hungry, you helped me when I was thirsty, and the people say, well, when was that? Jesus tells, whenever you do it to the least of these, you do it to me. And the work we do is serving Jesus. Not directly, but those are His people. He bought and paid for each one of them. They are His. Though they may not yet know it, they may not yet acknowledge it. They may never acknowledge it. I hope they do. But they are His. And the work we do to them is worship that we give to Jesus. There's a much greater significance to it. As Pastor Burmy said, mission is the first heartbeat of God. That's what He wants us to do. We're inviting those who cannot pay us back, because that's the way He is. God has compassion for those who are in any such situation, whether in poverty or emotional difficulties of any kind. And we are participants with Him in the work that He wants to do for them. So why are we here? Why did we go? We went to help. And we also get, in the process of helping, we grow ourselves. We grow in awareness of who we are, of where we are in God's plan, of what His plan is for the world, of love, of giving sacrificially. We have a role in that, able to participate in that. And we can see the results in people's lives, and we look forward to much more. Whether it's next year in the Bahamas or any other places that we may go. The participants who went this year may not go to the Bahamas next year, but they'll be somewhere. Maybe in Los Angeles. And they'll have a role to play in what God is doing in the work there. That He gives us the opportunity to participate with Him in what He's doing, whether it's in far-flung places or in nearby places. And as several have mentioned, that we want to thank the church for the support they've given. And in light of that, I wanted to look at Romans 12, back to Romans 12, and this time in verse 13. Romans 12, verse 13, share with God's people who are in need and practice hospitality. Hospitality is not just inviting them to our place. It can also be going to where they are. Being a friend to them. That is what Jesus did for this world. Sure, He's inviting us to where He is, but we're not ready to go there yet. He came to us first, as a human being, in flesh, with His own fleshly weakness. He condescended. He made a great sacrifice to be with us, to invite us. And as Paul says here at the first part of the verse, share with God's people in need. Our role in this is partly to share, and that's what the congregation has done, and that's what all those who gave financial support and prayer support to the missionaries who went. They're sharing with people who are in need. Those people are God's people. They have needs, whether physical, emotional, spiritual. They need to know more about God's love for them. Now, so that brings me to the offertory part of the message. So, if you're thinking about writing a check, you can start writing. because otherwise you had no warning. When the last speaker also has the offertory, all right, the baskets are ready to go around, I guess. So let's, and I did want to remind you that an offering is an act of worship. It's not just, me trying to get into your wallet. It's you offering up some of your appreciation to God for the work that He's doing. So let's take that offering.